Thank you, One Young World Summit, for having me here. When I got the invitation, it didn't take me very long to say yes, because you're a movement of young people, young leaders, and Amnesty International is also a movement of 7 million people across the world who stand up for human rights, stand up for justice. I wanted to give a health warning before I start my presentation. And the health warning is that Amnesty International just says the truth the way it is. It doesn't beat around the bush. We have no political agenda, no religious, no economic, no orthodoxy. So the only thing we do is we stand up for human rights. So we name countries, we name individuals, we don't beat around the bush. So if I name names which you don't like me naming, just take a deep breath, because we don't, we do this with everybody. Don't take it personally. So let's see if this thing works as well. How does this work? This way? Oh.
The slides don't appear to be working, guys.
Let's stay. Yeah. Okay, that's good. So corruption is the topic that I'm speaking on, and it's particularly in relation to the Sustainable Development Goal 16. And you know, when I was thinking about just the topic and what I should say to you, I was starting to get angry. And I realized that corruption makes me really angry. And it makes me angry because it's got something which is fundamentally wrong with it. I kind of also feel helpless. It seems to be a complete contempt of ordinary people by those who are powerful people who are using their power, which often we have given them that power, but they are now using that power to abuse authority, to abuse public resources. And this makes me, angry. And it also makes me angry because I feel helpless that despite all the knowledge and information and everything I have, that this system continues. So I wanted to start by asking, does corruption make you angry?
Yes.
Does it make you angry?
Yes.
Does it make you very angry? Yes. Okay, that's good. We've got a baseline there. I just wanted to establish this. And the other thing about corruption is that it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. In fact, and there's different ways in which you can talk about it, right? There's petty corruption. Like those of us who come from developing countries, from poor countries, I come from India myself, this kind of local policeman who hassles you. If you want even a passport, you have to bribe the government official. And that's common. That's kind of petty corruption. Then you got like really grand corruption, like the Trump and the Putin, and that's a serious kind of stuff. At least it's kind of, we don't know, you can never prove these things, of course, but it's in the air. And I mean, you're looking at what's happening in Brazil now. I mean, governments have fallen. That's really grand corruption. Unfortunately, many developing countries have both petty corruption and grand corruption. But I did want to check, do any of you come from a country where there is no corruption? Anybody? No, so it's everywhere, right? So, and that makes me even more angry. And I wanted to put my anger on the table to start with. Now, the Sustainable Development Goal 16, it talks about corruption, but it also talks about a bunch of other things. And the reason it does that, the reason why that set of targets have been put under the Goal 16 is because corruption is, in some ways, a manifestation or a symptom of a bunch of other things which are happening underneath that. And one of the big things which is happening underneath corruption is unaccountable governance. And we talked about that in the plenary just a moment ago. Where you have accountable governance, where you have the rule of law functioning, for example, if institutions are functioning, if you have accountability in place, chances are you're going to have less corruption. The other dimension to it, which is not in the Goal 16, it's elsewhere, is that corruption, of course, affects everybody in a country, but there's no question that it affects the poor and the marginalized, the voiceless, significantly more, disproportionately more. So, I mean, if you're very poor, you end up having to face much more of the negative effects of corruption than if you have all the resources in the world. So the issue of inequality and poverty are very intimately linked to the issue of corruption. So the way I talk about it is that corruption, inequality, and injustice are three legs of the same stool, and they're mutually reinforcing. They actually help each other. And a great example of this right now is from this region. Oh, I'm going the wrong way now. Well, let's try this. This way. Does it go this way? Okay. This is where technology. This is. I'm trying to move it in this direction. The green one should work. Oh yeah, okay. It's just my lack of ability to press this thing in the right way. So this is a country which is in the neighborhood, Venezuela. Any Venezuelans here in the audience? Yeah. Venezuelans? Okay. And I wanted to give this example of Venezuela because leave the politics of what's happening in Venezuela apart, because obviously it's a deeply divided situation now. But you can see on the ground, the humanitarian and human rights crisis that Venezuela is facing is affecting the poor, the ordinary people, in a very, very serious way. So we have to remember that these things are very, very interconnected. And I wanted to also give you a couple of more examples on this. I was recently okay, I'm doing it again. I want to give you the example of Peru. And it's interesting, Fernando was talking about Peru. This was just a few weeks ago in Lima. And this woman, Melchora, who's an indigenous leader from a small community not far from Cusco, which is in the high altitude part of Peru. We were at a press conference talking about the indigenous communities' reality. As you know, indigenous communities all over the world, particularly the Americas, have been marginalized for decades. Melchora and her community had suddenly realized from 2014 onwards that the river from which they drew their water was starting to get toxic. The taste had started changing. Women's health, children's health had started getting affected. Their suspicion is that it's because of the mining activities of a big multinational mining company nearby. And they have been documenting what they've been going through, and we amplified this in a press conference in Lima just a few weeks ago. And Melchora broke down in the middle of that press conference, and this is just a shot of that reality of, and this is grand corruption, because everybody knows in Peru as to why the water is contaminated in that river, but nobody's doing it. It's 3 years. And I was saying that if this had happened in one of the posh suburbs in Lima, this problem would have been fixed in a week. For 3 years, the communities there have been going from pillar to post, and not a single action has been taken. There's been some, pretense actions, but on the ground, no change. Berta Caceres, I don't know how many of you know Berta's picture. Berta's a leader fighting for against a dam construction in Honduras. She fought a long battle, and 1 year ago she was killed. And Berta, anybody from Honduras here? Hondurans? I can't really see all of you. You have to shout, otherwise I won't know you're there. But Berta's case is very, very well known. But all of this is, leading us towards this point about no action taken. Berta Caceres murdered a year ago, but impunity prevails. We don't really know what's happening. No clear answers as to who killed her, why she died. So if you stand up against corruption, you stand up against injustice. And this is not just, I gave you 2 examples, but in 2016, Amnesty's analysis showed that 22 countries, people standing up against injustice, corruption, inequality, were killed. And we are running now a global campaign called BRAVE to support these brave people. I want to now move on to why is it that we're in this situation? If all of us are so angry about it, if it is so ubiquitous, if it's so present all over the world, why are we not stopping injustice, inequality, corruption, which is so interlinked? Why is this not going away? And I already said, in my head, there are 2 reasons. One is that the people who do this get away with it, the point about impunity. But the second point is we are allowing them to get away with it. And this is the apathy and helplessness and hopelessness that we feel when we are facing a large system. We think, we're not going to be able to fight the system. But I want to kind of move us into a more positive space to talk about examples where just even in the last year to 18 months, where people have come together and where people have raised their voice, things are changing and their resistance matters. And in Trump's world, this resistance against his Muslim and refugee ban has been very, very powerful. It's a struggle. It's a battle we haven't won. And what Trump is doing in the US is not unique to the US, because instead of dealing with the issues of corruption, inequality, discrimination, racial injustices, what he does, and other leaders, take Duterte in the Philippines, for example, or Orban in Hungary. So instead of dealing with the real issues, they divert our attention and they scapegoat particular parts of the community. So it could be the Roma in Hungary, it could be LGBT people, it could be women, it could be refugees, it could be Muslims. So you pick on somebody and shift our focus. But the powerful answer to this in many parts of the world is people coming together and resisting it. There are far too many good news stories about this. And I could go on. I mean, this is a great example from Senegal. I think the role of any Senegalese here? So yes, from here. Somewhere you guys are there. You're hiding. Okay. I have a lot of African examples, so at least the Africans need to make a noise. But these guys, journalists and musicians, came together to make sure that Abdoulaye Wade, who wanted to continue as president after being there for term after term, they really pushed back, and there was a peaceful change in Senegal. And Abdoulaye Wade, who started very well as the president, his last stretch was full of corruption. Amazing work from South Africa. The fees must fall protest. South Africans here? Okay. Okay. Now look at this. South Africans are awake and making a noise. Where are the others? And I could go on. I mean, we have La Lucha, the protests in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Amazing work which they're doing. And the thing about, the reason I'm picking on these examples, because Amnesty's got 1,000 examples I can bring to you, is almost all of these examples are young people standing up against injustice, against corruption. And it's not that you always win that battle. It's a tough battle, but the victories are not uncommon. I don't know if you heard of it. Yesterday, we had a fascinating example yesterday. And this was, I don't even have a slide because it happened yesterday. 1,000 students in Norway, high school students, went out to protest because one of their schoolmates, Talibe, I don't know, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, Taibe, she and her family were deported to Afghanistan. And you really don't want to be deported to Afghanistan at this point in time. It's not a safe place to go to. And Norway, which is normally, we think of Norway as a country which is which is an iconic country for human rights, has deported this girl and her family. And 1,000 high school students came out yesterday to say, no, this is not something we're going to accept. Any Norwegians here? Yes. Yes. Somewhere. Okay, Norwegians are shy. They won't shout. So, and yeah, I wanted to just, close by saying that, as we speak here today, and we talk about this toxic combination of corruption, inequality, injustice, and impunity, which is afflicting not just Goal 16, because really, if you don't have the rule of law, if you have impunity, if leaders get away without doing anything on the ground, I'm not quite sure any of the other sustainable development goals can be achieved, because you're not going to get your education, your health, your water, if the government is actually busy siphoning money away. In Myanmar, as we speak, is one of the worst examples. And we are now naming Min Aung Hlaing, who's Myanmar's commander-in-chief, because there's been a lot of attack on Aung San Suu Kyi, rightly so in some ways, but the fact is that these guys are controlling the strings. So I would request all of you to take your phones out and take an action on Aung Hlaing. Any Burmese here? Any Myanmar folks here? I think there are a few, right? Myanmar somewhere. Okay. So our assessment is that, unless we directly challenge the military right now, this situation is not going to end. So I appeal to all of you to join us in a very concrete action. But beyond that, of course, I mean, it's not just, this is one very visible thing, it's in our minds right now. But beyond that, of course, I think for Amnesty, and I hope you'll all join, we join hands as movements in multiple ways, as individuals, to demand for accountability, demand for fairness, demand an end to corruption, and a demand to make sure that the world achieves the Sustainable Development Goals. I want to close by showing you a short film. And I want to show you this film because while governments and our leaders seem apathetic and not really interested in helping humanity right now, in many, many countries, of course, there are a few exceptions, but on the whole, we really face challenges. And I'm not only talking about government leaders, it's also a lot of the corporate leaders. There's some positive examples given earlier, but there's also many examples where the companies are not ready to be accountable. So we can't ignore the fact that, it's a very mixed bag. But in that reality, at the same time, ordinary people are taking positive actions all the time. And this film shows you the reality of refugees and how, if we connect just people, human beings, across borders, what the impact of this is. I've seen this film at least 5 times before, and every time I watched it, I've cried. I'm just warning you. So let's get the film on, guys.
Nice mustache. Six, 5. Nee, 6, 5.
Are you new in Berlin?
Yeah, 8 months.
And are you alone here or with your family?
No, I don't. This life, sometimes nice, sometimes not good.
Beatriz. I'm keeping my eyes on you. Oh. Hello. I expect you to ask my number. Be a strong man.
Thank you so much. We will go to the zoo, maybe next few days. I will text you if you would like to.
I would love it. Of course. You can do it.
When I was looking into her eyes, I was trying to see what I could tell from the life that she lived, and I think I could tell that there was a lot of experience lived there.
It doesn't matter, look at the eyes or something, just give yourself a chance to talk and to look at the other person.
How many people cried? Okay, get honest. No, I just want to thank you both for bringing me here, bringing Amnesty International here. I hope I can take all of you to Amnesty International. We are a people's movement. We take no money from governments or companies. That allows us to remain independent, impartial, but we rely on people, people power. So we join hands today, and I hope it's just the beginning. Thank you very much. All the best.